What exactly is an S-Bucker? Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. We're going to find out today because we have a new Guitar Day purchaser named Ashley over in the UK who just fell in love with this interesting Explorer custom that we're going to document today that has these elusive S-Buckers. But first things first, what is this model? It's an Explorer custom. We've actually documented one on the show before. It was an interesting mod collection version with a multicolored design. It wasn't necessarily for everyone, but recently the custom shop has been playing around with some colors. So this one showed up at Chicago Music Exchange in this kind of sparkly white finish. So that's certainly unique, especially because it's not a mod collection or anything like that. It's straight up first quality Gibson custom shop stuff. But what makes an Explorer custom different? A, you get multi-ply body binding just like a Les Paul custom, should be 7-ply, and you get a multi-ply pickguard. Then if it was made before 2011 or after 2019, you'll have a real ebony fretboard with mother of pearl block inlays and binding along it here. Now, do you get it on the headstock? Controversially, most of the times no. That doesn't mean there's not an occasional custom order here or there, but generally speaking, this is what the Explorer customs look like. My first impressions out of the case, it's all about this giant neck profile. That is a big beefy C neck. This thing feels really junky. But what made me most excited to review and document Ashley's new guitar is the S-Buckers. This is a Chicago Music Exchange exclusive custom bucker that's 10 to 20% underwound, so they're just kind of going for that aged-in vintage pickup sound. Whether it's good or bad, I don't know. We'll find out today. But as far as our finish, it's just like a blinding white that has silver sparkles sprayed all over it. It certainly reminds me of some of the mod collection guitars that we've seen in the past, but we've got the gold hardware. But from far away, you don't really even notice the sparkles, so that's really for you or if the stage light happens to catch it. But I will say the whole black and white theme looks really good on this. Whereas once you go to the back, it's more predominantly just white. But besides just the guitar, you get a Gibson custom shop case. It says our COAs on the inside, and the interior is this burgundy color. Hasn't really changed too much since the 2010s era for this particular model. And then inside here, yeah, not too much with the custom shop. Just a Gibson app pamphlet, your case key, hang tag, and your pre-pack checklist, as well as your COA, billing it as an Explorer custom. So with all these fancy features, I know what you're thinking. It's probably a really expensive model. Yes, however, it's not the most expensive Explorer because these are still made out of mahogany, so they don't have the 2x premium for Carina bodies, because one of those is 10 grand, whereas the standard ebony version of one of these is now up to 5,500. But custom colors tend to get more expensive. For example, this one was listed for 6,400. So to learn the rest about Ashley's new Explorer, let's go ahead and throw it onto the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs. And while we're getting it torn apart, if you're in the market for a brand new guitar and you're ready to buy and want to see it featured on the show first, feel free to check out my website for more information under the NGD tab. Here we are. So typically this model comes with the 490R, 498T set, which are nice pickups, but Ashley wanted something different in his collection, so that's why he chose this particular one from CME, because it had the custom buckers in it. But if you really fall in love with what you see today, a different dealer, Bizarre Guitars, listed another one on Reverb, but it just has the regular pickups. But it appears the custom shop just marks these with an S. However, our bridge pickup still has our water slide decal, so this one must have just fell off during handling and installation. But how underwound are they? If I remember correctly, most custom buckers are usually around 8, aren't they? So the neck is 7.23, our bridge position 7.23, and 3.62 in the middle. But there's actually one more difference between these and regular custom buckers. These are wax potted. So apparently the guys who shop at CME, they don't like the squealing nature of custom buckers, so they have them wax pot their exclusive version to cut down on that. Now it does change the tone, and whether you want an unpotted versus a potted pickup or not, that's personal preference, but it does make it unique and different. But here's a peek inside our neck pickup cavity. You can see our continuation of our white and sparkly finish, as well as that long neck tenon. And you can just barely see through to some of the mahogany, although strangely a dark area right here, and pretty much more of the same stuff in our bridge. But check out the pickup covers. These are actually lightly aged, I guess you could say. Gibson calls this the VOS treatment. So normally they put like a gunk on the guitar that just kind of dulls down the finish so it's not so hyper gloss. And I was curious how they would do that to a sparkly guitar. Now if you run your hand along it, yeah, you can kind of feel it, but being a white guitar, you really don't see it too much. But it definitely tames the sparkliness just just a little bit. But for me, I mainly just notice it on the hardware, like that bridge pickup especially. The neck has a little. They've even worn away some of the gold on the bridge and a lot on the tailpiece. So that is intended to be like that. But this model utilizes a regular Nashville bridge, not an ABR1. So you've got the studs within the body, and it is a full weight tailpiece, so non-historic spec. As far as your controls, it's neck volume, bridge volume, and a master tone. And while we're over here, we can peek underneath our pick guard. Now all these light, fine scratches, I believe that's also part of the VOS process. But to be fair, straight jet black ebony things tend to get scratched. But here's how they route these. Just a little bit for your wires. And here's a look at our toggle switch. And I did notice something about our pick guard. It is ever so slightly notched right here for our bridge. And I believe the reason they do that is not because it's not going to fit if you don't. It's to let your fingers get a little bit more room in here if you need to adjust your bridge. Here's something I get questions on a lot of times. People will say, hey, I just bought a brand new Gibson. There's a lipped ridge between the binding and where the paint begins for the top. Is that normal? For Gibson production, yes. However, there are variances within that. Like this one, it's got a small step up. That's pretty much just to be expected for how they do things. A lot of times where people will really notice it is right here along the neck. Now sometimes it can be a really large ridge, and the sparkly finishes tend to get it the worst. If it really bugs you, you could take some light sandpaper to even it out. However, when you just bought a $6,500 guitar, that's not necessarily what you always want to do. But overall, I wouldn't say this example's too bad. Just kind of reminds me of snow falling in the wintertime. But now that we know all about our mahogany body, we can move on to that chunky mahogany neck and ebony fretboard. As far as your specs, this one is pretty standard 22 medium jumbo style, 24 3/4 inch scale length with a 12-inch fretboard radius. I measure a 1.68 inch nut width, increasing to 2.07 at the 12th. First fret neck depth 0.9. Wow, 1.03 by the 12th. Here's a look at that neck profile at the first fret and the 12th fret. It's just a really full C shape. However, it has a little bit of D characteristics towards the first fret. It's not a lot, but you can definitely see how it gets a little bit more rounded in this area the further up you go. And I know it's hard to see it. It's because the headstock area is really flat. They've carved it down to about right here. So like halfway to your first fret, it does feel a bit flat here, but then it rounds right on up. Needless to say, it's a giant neck. But to go along what I was talking about earlier, you see this right here, how there's a little bit of like a reddish orange area? That's actually buffing compound caught within that ledge. But if you just run your nail along that, it will come off. But now as far as our headstock, if you're curious what it does look like when they bind it, basically just look at a Dave Mustaine Flying V. It's got the Explorer headstock. It has the binding. The problem is it makes the headstock look so much smaller because there's not much to work with on an Explorer headstock to begin with. But at least we do get the Gibson Mother of Pearl logo. And this model comes stock with Golden Grover tuners. But our truss rod's looking good on this one, and it ships with a plain truss rod cover. Here's what that looks like cleaned up. Usually what I suggest is taking your shirt or something like this, that way your nail doesn't scratch the finish, and just rub it along that line, and it comes off real easy. Occasionally you'll find that along the body's binding as well, but this one looks pretty good in that aspect. I did notice a few black marks in the binding over here. If you look at it straight on, it looks like somebody slipped with their fretting tool and just slightly marred the binding a bit, because if you look at the rest, it's perfectly straight, but it just lightly dips in there. But I also noticed just past the 5th fret, the binding dips in just a little bit right there. Like, it's not enough I think you're going to notice while playing. This is just fine nitpicky details as a QC analysis thing. I don't think that's going to affect anything. And then up here on the binding, we also have some tooling marks. From what I've seen, pretty much par for the course on a Gibson custom shop. But with 3 bad things, I will leave 1 compliment. The frets do look pretty shiny for a brand new custom shop. But man, gold fret wire would have been an awesome touch on this, just to take it a little bit more over the top. If you want to see an Explorer custom kind of like that, check out the Lizzie Hale Dark model. It was Gibson USA produced, but did have the gold fret wire. And if you want to stick with the white, you could also check out her first edition. But now we can move on to the back. As we were saying earlier, not too much to go over here. It's just your sparkly white finish greeting your eyes. However, we do have a multiply black plastic output jack plate. There are strap buttons all the way over here by the point of the horn. Our wiring is just the regular Gibson branded pots. I was about to say, where's our capacitor? It's there. It's just hiding over here on our tone pot. But here's the thing to know about sparkly nitro finishes. They always tend to finish check. Some earlier than others. So just know, just because it looks great right now, brand new, finish checking is like 5 times more likely when you add these sparkles to it for whatever reason. Another thing that'll eventually occur is a line where the neck joins the body. So right now this one looks okay as far as that. But the side that you see while you're playing, you can see what I'm talking about, that line right there. And eventually it'll also form here. There's no way around that on a nitro finish. Now when you start using poly finishes and things that are thicker, yeah, you can get away with that. So whenever anybody brings that up that, hey, my Squire doesn't have this, it's different finish styles. I'm not saying that in defense of Gibson, it's just the natures of these finishes. Lacquer sink will occur, and as long as you know that it's gonna happen eventually, usually you're not as upset about it. So that's why I bring that up. It's more of an education thing. Managed expectations. But there was just your custom shop decal. Our serial number on this one is 402305. So that means it was produced in the year 2024, so it's fresh off the line. It was the 2305th guitar made that year that utilizes this serial number format. So not the 2000th Explorer Custom. There's many different lines that use this. There's a look at our smaller Grover tuners. All said and done, it weighs 8 pounds, 11.4 ounces. It feels like it's 13 pounds. So just because it doesn't seem that heavy as compared to a Les Paul, trust me, there's some heft to this one. So let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how this one sounds with the S-Buckers. They definitely nailed that vintage tone. I was a little unsure if wax spotting them would make them sound different, but they sound good to my ears. So there we go. What did I think of this Explorer Custom? I wouldn't call it my favorite custom color I've ever seen, but I can definitely see why it spoke to the viewer, because it's just something a little bit extra. Looking at this thing outside, it really was blindingly bright, but it was a particularly sunny day today. Now it is pretty heavy and it's a super chunky neck profile, so an Explorer Custom, probably not for everyone out there, but I do like those Custom Bucker S pickups. I thought they had some pretty nice vintage tones to it. Again, I'm not much of a lead guitar player, but testing a couple of licks up here, I was quite happy with what it was able to offer. Now, are they better or worse than the stock 498T? I guess I'll leave that up to you. I think they just cater towards slightly different styles of music, because the 498T is a hotter pickup, so it's more for modern rock in that sense, whereas this has a bit more of a vintage flavor to it. And if you ever had to sell these pickups separately, they're going to be worth a little bit more than the mass-produced 490R, 498T. Again, nothing against those pickups. Honestly, I think they sound pretty good in most things they're in. But what I'm trying to say is, if you're going to pay almost $1,000 premium for a unique finish, at least there was something else that gave this one a slight push. But alright, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care.